Now that we got installation, licensing, and node order out of the way, let's take a closer look at the interface of Colourlab, where things are and how they work. So I'm going to again open any clip. In this case, I'm still using the same clip from Ari Alexa, and I'm going to add a second node, and there I'm going to drop the Colourlab plugin. And now let me take you through the interface. The first setting that you have is the input profile. And this profile is very specific for the camera you're using. So the most important thing you're going to need to learn to do now is that every time you're using particular camera, you're using particular input for that camera. Now these inputs have been created through years of testing and correcting and a lot of experience that I had when working with cinematographers on set, understanding what they like with certain cameras and what they don't like. So they are not purely technical like approaches. There is some creative element to these input looks. Basically, Canon 3 look is if you're using a Canon camera, Sony 2 is if you're using Sony in S-Log 2 mode, Sony 3 is if you're using Sony in S-Log 3 mode, Alexa is Alexa, Panasonic, you're going to have to use Vlog mode for Panasonic in order for Colourlab to work correctly. Red IPP2, this is a specific setting for Red RAW interpretation. We're going to go into more detail there, how to select that. Then we have a standard Red, unless we didn't switch to the IPP2. And a display is also for material that is not in any logarithmic color space. I'm going to go into more detail later on. Since we are using Alexa, we're going to select Alexa as our camera input. Now, if you look at the bottom, is the second most important setting, and in most cases you're absolutely fine to select the Rec 7 or 9. You have two other options, and I'm going to explain later what these two other options are and what how they can be used. The next part of Colourlab is basically the contrast option. So basically here you can select different contrast values. In my case, I'm going to just select an S contrast. I'm going to explain into more details how these contrast options work, and especially in 201 we're going to explore how best creatively to use certain contrast option. So just for you, S1 is the best way how to start, and how to see what you got and where your camera sits. The next thing I need to do is I need to select my color palette. Now, for example, I'm going to select, in my case, a Fuji film color palette, and I'm going to use Eterna 250 as the color palette for this particular shot. Okay, now I have few more options available. The number one option is the lift, gamma, and gain option, which is like your primary, but this option is to be used slightly differently than the normal primary color correction, normal CDL. I'm going to explain a little bit more what this option does differently. You can also tweak, overall setting or just per channel when you need to be very specific to adjust only specific value. So lift, gamma, gain. And then also you have a printer lights, which are going to emulate the effect that you would have created if you had been using traditional, like a chemical processing and printing method. And then this one you have to be very sensitive, because that we have a very little amount of leeway here, because very quickly you're going to get a very strong effect. So for example, I'm just going to go and add a little bit of blue to my printer lights to cool down this shot. And then as last, you have a saturation dial where you can basically add a little bit saturation to your look. So you see very quickly I have created a very interesting look that is a combination between standard S contrast that you normally see on Rec 7 and 9 images, and a color palette that comes from Fuji Eterna 250 stock. Very interesting way of working with looks. Once you are happy with this, once you have got, all of these settings sorted, you can say, okay, I'm happy, this is now my look. And then what you can do is you can just click on Export LUT button, and this is automatically going to take you to a Colourlab folder inside your LUT, where you're going to go and say, my first look, and just save it. And this way you have created this particular look as a 3D lookup table, so that you can replace it instead of using the Colourlab plugin if you need to get more real-time performance. But for the moment, let's stop here, because I have to take you through some more theory and color science information first.